Underdog Collectibles is an online shop run for collectors by collectors. Join them every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday night as they break new products, talk sports, and hopefully you'll pull a great hit to add to your collection. Visit them at www.udogcollect.com and tell them WaxPackHero sent you. Remember, always bet on the underdog. You're listening to the WaxPackHero Sports Card Minute, a podcast where we discuss both the hobby and business sides of collecting. I'm your host, Mike Summer, and I want to help you buy, sell, and trade your way into a collection you'll love. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I've got a conversation with Ty Wilson, the man behind BreakerCulture.com and the Breaker Culture podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about his collecting background. We're going to talk about the origins of his creation of sports card content and how he decided to turn that into a business. Enjoy the conversation. Ty, welcome to the show.
Well, hey, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's Saturday morning. It's pretty cloudy here in central Illinois. Looks like we're going to get some rain later.
Oh, I think you're getting our rain. You're getting our big storm, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully it gets through here. It's starting to get pretty dry. Yeah. Well, hey, I'm glad we got a chance to connect here and talk a little bit about Ty Wilson and Breaker Culture.
It's got a nice ring to it.
Hey, there you go. Maybe we just get started by giving us a little bit of your collecting background.
Yeah. So the collecting background. So I've been collecting really since since I can remember. Right. My parents were pretty good about letting us as kids, like brothers, collect growing up, and so we would save up our allowance and buy cards as young kids. And I can still remember 20-something years ago, rounding up the kids in the neighborhood and having like trading parties. I feel like that's kind of the forgotten art of sports cards, getting together and trading cards. Who would have thunk?
Every once in a while, we still do that at some of the local shows, but
yeah, that's true. Yeah, and some shops facilitate that well, but no, man, I grew up collecting, Royals cards. I grew up collecting somewhat of a Chiefs collector, but I ended up gravitating towards like Drew Bledsoe and certain players that I really liked. I liked the San Antonio Spurs a lot growing up. So yeah, I just built collections that way, and I had a couple close friends that were really big collectors as well. And so we would all go to card shops together and collect our guys. And I mean, gosh, I still remember like buying Finest and SP when they hit the streets for the first time, like in '93 for Finest, an SP, trying to chase the Derek Jeter rookie. Like those were the days, man. Like those were some of my best memories in sports were those days.
What was your first set? What was the year that you started collecting that first set that you started to buy a lot of?
That's a good question. It's one of the collector's choice sets because those are the ones I could afford. You get the 99-cent packs, right? So I think I had a few of the collector's choice sets, but it was a lot of the basketball. I remember the 95, 96, like 96, 97 Fleer Ultra basketball being a really important one for me. So,
okay, so I started mid-'80s. It sounds like you started early 90s then.
Correct, yeah. So I was 10 in 82 or 92. So yeah, like early 90s is when I could remember the most.
Well, how about now? What do you collect now?
So now it's a little bit more about what my sons want to collect, right? So we're big Mizzou fans, Mizzou Tigers. So we collect a lot of Mizzou players. So like Michael Porter Jr. we go after, and then we're all about the Royals. So we have a pretty, when we open product and sell it, we're doing it as a way to fund our Royals collection, more or less. So me and the boys have a good Royals collection. My older son is a big Chris Bryant fan, so we got expensive taste, man. From Michael Porter to Chris Bryant to like Bobby Witt. Like you got some of the most expensive guys in the hobby.
That is true. Although Bryant's come down a little bit over this last year, so
very true.
Kind of off his peak. At what point in that whole process did you start to do the selling aspect, or when did some of that kind of business side of things come in for you?
Yeah, so I would say it was probably in the late 90s and early 2000s when I was in college. maybe late high school, and I realized I need some cash.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started selling off some of my cards. And at that time, like eBay really wasn't, it wasn't as big, right? There wasn't a true sports card marketplace. But it was, I mean, I tried to sell them on eBay, but I remember just thinking about flipping and like trying to go to Walmart and grab, boxes of cards and open them and flip them. And even then, like buying them on blowout back then, the early 2000s, and opening and trying to make money was trying to hustle and do it, but it wasn't very lucrative. It was experimenting.
Did you have that kind of stereotypical break, or it sounds like maybe you were fairly consistent from the time that you started through today, or did you have a break?
A break as in like
as in not really being an active collector or not really being active in the hobby?
Oh, gotcha. I really didn't. I would say maybe my wife and I have been married for 15 years, and I would say maybe that first year or two of marriage where it felt foolish spending like the little money we had on cards.
Sure.
There was a break there, right? But I still had cards and still, had a collection and enjoyed it. So
at what point did the idea for the breakerculture.com site start?
Yeah, so that was probably in see, what are we in now? 2020. So in 14, my wife and I and 3 kids at the time, we were overseas doing some missions work in China. And I had been into cards for a long time heading up to that, but when we left for China, I wasn't doing cards obviously in China. And I was talking to some guys that I knew relatively well. One of them, you guys probably know, like Brent and Becca, Brent Williams. Communicating with him kind of while I was overseas. And I started to get the vibe that there was a lot of breaker transparency issues. And so sorry about my dog in the background, by the way.
Yeah, that's good. It's natural.
I'm in my natural habitat. No, I just realized there was an issue with filling out reviews and understanding kind of what's going on with group breakers. And so I thought, you know what, I'm gonna kind of help the hobby a little bit and put together this group breaking review site, because I'm tired of seeing all these posts about people getting ripped off. Mm-hmm. And so it started as this idea of a Yelp for group breaking, and that's kind of where breaker culture, spawned out of. It was in 2005, 2006.
2005 or 2015.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, 2015. Yeah, 15 years ago. 2015. Sorry.
Okay. And then at what point did you add on the podcast aspect of that?
Yeah, so it quickly evolved, right? For the first year or two, it was helpful. I got a lot of pushback. People were frustrated that people could be honest about their group breaking, and then some group breakers were very open to it. But I would say probably 2017 it started to evolve into this. Well, shoot, everyone's buying cards. The group breakings kind of encouraged flipping and investing and all these new terms in the hobby, and sort of evolved into an analytics site. And then out of that, in late 2017 and early 2018, we started the podcast. And first few were just me, and then I had Shani Pellet on, and Shani's been a big part of doing the podcast, and he's kind of the backbone of getting all that started, and still is. Pops on every 4 or 5 episodes to join the podcast.
When I got back into the hobby in 2015, 16, and then started to throughout 17 try to find as much hobby content as I could, that's when I stumbled across your site and the podcast. And one of the things, well, there's 2 things that really stood out to me. And one is the analytics that you put on the website as a helpful resource for people. So let's start there. Is that something that you have a background in? Is that something that you developed as you were getting more and more into developing the site? Or, where did that analytics perspective come from, I guess?
Yeah, I guess inherently I'm probably a numbers guy more so than anything else. That's what I went to school for, finance, and I'm drawn to that stuff. But yeah, I guess there's certain technologies, right? There's a platform called Tableau that's really great for that type of stuff, and I got hooked into that and enjoy using Tableau. And once I figured out how to use it, and then I figured out how to extract data from an eBay repository, I realized, holy crap, could do some cool stuff with this. And I think it's one of those things, you probably know this too, Mike. It's like when you throw stuff out there and then people start hitting you up and saying, wow, man, this is really helpful. Like, I can't wait to see the next report. And you see that like consistently, it starts to, motivate you to put more work into it. And so I started to see that, fairly consistently with some of the reports I was doing. Like, people really enjoyed it. So then it reaches the point where it's like, oh boy, like now I'm putting 20 hours a week into this.
Yeah,
and I'm not making any money, right? This is not good. I got to figure out something to do here.
And that kind of leads me to kind of that next follow-on question is, one of the things that I appreciate most about, I don't know if appreciate most is the best way to say it. One of the things that I'm very interested in is combining both the hobby and the business, right?
Yep.
And figuring out a way to both celebrate this hobby that we all enjoy, as well as turn it into something that can generate some extra income. And I know you've got a day job that's your primary focus, and Breaker Culture and the podcast and everything is kind of a side hustle, similar for me as WaxPackHero. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of what you just said there, of you realized how much time you were spending on it and wanted to say, is there a way that I could generate some revenue from this? At what point did you decide to try to start to experiment with sponsorships and the Patreon program that you've got, and some of those things that allow you to generate some revenue from this and see some financial reward from the benefit that you're providing collectors?
Yeah, no, I think it's very well put. No, I think it was probably in late 2018. With that point, I'd run the site for over 2 years, then the podcast for a bit. And I mean, it was legitimately, I sat down with my wife and we both agreed, like, this is taking up so much time. It's becoming more than just a hobby, right? Mm-hmm. Where I agree with her. Like, look, I have to come up with a way to make this somewhat lucrative to pouring more time into it. And I get it, man. Everyone likes free content, and I love putting out free content, right? But at the same time, you should strive to put out content that people would want to pay for. That's kind of the way I've framed it now. All that to say, it was probably in late 2018 where I started dabbling in like really tying in affiliate revenue into the site.
Okay.
So, all the eBay stuff, and there's been plenty of conversations about that on, our podcast about it, but, being able to help at least get a little bit of a kickback for putting out, reports and things like that. And then I would say early 2019 started to sign up some sponsors for the site. And that's never been a very, key driver for the site or revenue. But it was probably mid 2019. So it's been over a year now where we had the Patreon up. And that was just one of those things where I had folks saying, hey, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? Can we dive deeper into this type of insight? And I thought, you know what, let me put together something where people want to pay for this, $15 a month, and I can spend an extra 10 hours a week or 10 hours, every couple weeks putting together really deep reports for them, and they want to pay for it, then I'll do it. And so that totally surprised me with how many people were interested in that. And I have a very solid group of people that pay for that every month now. So
it's an interesting balance to walk between, you still have a lot of good free content on the site, but then where do you draw that line of, okay, this is what I can do for free and this is what I want to add on to the Patreon membership side of things? Do you have like a rule of thumb on what you use to kind of draw that distinction?
Yeah, so I would say there's two things. One, typically for Patreon users, I'll give content early. So I'll put out stuff that might end up on the site anyway, but I'm going to give it to Patreon users, 3 or 4 days before it hits the site. Because a lot of people use it now for, them making decisions on their, spending in the hobby. Where do I spend? Where do I sell? Where do I buy? All these things. And that's kind of what they're using to drive their decisions. And then others, certain pricing ladders and things like that, I've always had free on the site, and I will always keep free on the site, but I don't do them like weekly anymore on the site. It'll be more like a monthly report that summarizes content. So yeah, it's a fine balance. You're right. It is tough, right? It's you get some people that are rubbed the wrong way with it, and some people understand like time is valuable. Like time's the one thing we can't get back,
Yep.
And so I'm trying to be sensitive to my family, right? I'm held accountable to my family. That's all I know.
The other aspect that attracted me to what you were doing was the podcast itself. And even, I mean, well before I started this podcast, I had been listening to you, and one of the things that stood out to me was just your interview style and the conversational nature that you had with the people and stores and breakers and things like that you were interviewing. Did you have much of a background in podcasting, interviewing, presentation, that whole interpersonal aspect of things, or is that something that you just had naturally or you developed along the way? What's the story with the podcasting and interview stuff?
First off, you have a great style too, by the way. You do a really good job. But I would say I've been in sales, in software sales for a long time. And so communicating with people and asking questions is part of what I've had to do for a decade. So I think it's maybe just in my blood to a certain extent, but you get the first couple out of the way and you start to learn kind of how the podcast world works, what audience is like, and you get your style and you kind of stick to it. And I think that's one of those things. The first, I think I moved them off of the iTunes world. Like the first 10 podcasts were so bad. They were just terrible. And it was just, you realize when you speak over people, when you don't ask leading questions, when you don't ask like second level questions, like it's boring. People don't want to hear me talk. They want to hear the interviewee talk. Lessons learned is how we got there. But thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Now, at some point, late second half of last year, the Bench Clear Media Network started that you're heavily a part of. Yep. Can you tell me kind of what the origin for that was?
Yeah, I think so. The idea behind Bench Clear is relatively straightforward. Like there was a group of us that thought, you know what, like the hobby is just, it's a straight line upwards right now. Like there's just so much excitement around the hobby. And yeah, you're right. This is during the national where we really started having conversations around this. This is Jeff and I, from Pack Geek, sitting down, and he's a big time media guy. And so we just started talking about what would it look like to get, certain content producers together just to in one channel to put out constant content, daily, every few days, and just have a constant flow of good stuff coming from one spot. And so that's kind of that was the simple idea behind it. It's changed a little bit since then. We're trying to figure out how to navigate it, but it's going well, I think. But it's just there's so many different niches in the hobby, like trying to figure out where to satisfy people and what people want, and is difficult. So we're trying to navigate those waters a little bit. But yeah, the idea is to have a one-stop shop for constant content coming out, and to do it in a way that doesn't cost money. It's free. You go to the site and you have all this good stuff, and typically focused on the YouTube world right now.
So kind of trying to be kind of a central hub for content.
Yeah, I mean, a perfect world would be have a channel that's got stuff on every day, that you can tune on. Thursday night you're going to have a couple shows that are running their episodes, and you can put it in the background, watch it while you're collecting and all that stuff. So we'll see if that works out.
Okay. Have there been other hobby related, I want to say spin-offs, but that's not quite the right term, but other associated sites or content focuses that have come as you've grown, as you've expanded, as you've tried some of these new things?
Yeah, lots of them. I would say I've helped with a lot of different things, not necessarily like they're my own things, but I've helped with a lot of things. More recently, I've kind of helped craft some of the style over at thedailyhobby.com, so the aggregated news site. Use some of my web expertise now to help with that, and then little things on the group breaker side, just kind of giving my feedback. And I've never fully been a part of any group breaker site, because that would be a conflict of interest, I think. But help provide feedback and kind of groups starting up, and it's very easy, right? Go back and listen to episodes and you can hear these guys that have been doing this for 10 years, talk about what they've gone through. That's probably the easiest way, but get a lot of those questions. People think I'm the expert, right? Because I interview them, but it's like the experts are the ones I'm interviewing.
Right. Right. As you started to get the site up and running and you started to grow, was there a certain strategy or approach that has worked well for you to start to gain some of that traction?
Yeah. So with the site, you're talking like just in terms of traffic and stuff like that?
Yeah, to start to gain attention, to start to gain traffic, to get feedback, to test, what's worked and what's not working.
Yeah. Yeah. I think early on, right, like 2016, you didn't have a ton of competition in the Google SEO world around sports cards. You had Cardboard Connection, right? And you had Beckett, and you had a couple other players. But, for you to put out content and have some keywords in your titles and your descriptions, like you were, for the most part, going to get some traffic. So realizing like then, just having consistent content, labeling it well, and building up an SEO presence was absolutely crucial. And that takes time. Like back then it took a year, right? And these days it takes even longer because of the way the Google algorithms are set up. But now, right, you're competing against hundreds of group breakers for SEO. You're competing against a lot of, sports card investing sites and all that stuff that are putting good money into buying up, the keywords and making it more expensive to acquire traffic. So for those starting out, like my advice is always you have to be strategic about the way you word things. You don't want it to be clickbait, but it's got to tie back to what you're talking about, and you have to be consistent, like very consistent, or it does not work.
What was something that you found to be a challenge, or something maybe that didn't work out as well as you were hoping?
Well, I would say maybe the impetus behind breaker culture at the beginning, right? The whole group break reviews, like it's still around a little bit, right? But that's not what we do now. And it's just with Google and Facebook groups now, like the transparency's there. With the blowout forums now being able to, you can talk about anybody, Twitter groups. You don't need a place to go get reviews for breakers these days. You'll know pretty quickly just by Googling it. So I would say I didn't really quite understand what I needed to do to make that work in the beginning. And in hindsight, I would probably do things a little differently to make that a true Yelp of group breaking.
Yeah, that can be a challenge, but I think for me, that kind of stuff is part of the fun, right? The give and take, the testing of an idea, and seeing what the market, quote unquote, the market wants to see or wants to do. And so, yeah, I like that challenge personally of testing some things out and seeing what works and what doesn't.
Where do you get your feedback mostly? Did you find this on Twitter or through email? How's your feedback flowing?
Most of my feedback comes from Twitter or direct on email. And I think primarily because, well, on the podcast, those are the two main things that I say reach out to me on Twitter or direct on email. But even on the website, in the contact me, that's the methods that I share to reach out to me. And so those are the two primary ways that I'm getting feedback at this point.
Nice.
Plus just the metrics, right? I'm seeing what pages are getting the traffic, that's a big determiner too, and for me, I look and see some of the reviews that I do on a particular set or an old, vintage product or whatever it might be have one level. But for me, like I've seen the guides that I've given to how to ship PWE or how to ship efficiently using various priority box sizes, how to do a variation listing on eBay. Those are the things that continue to get traffic month after month after month versus a one-time bump, with a more timely product review or whatever. And so I look at traffic as well to get some of that feedback.
Numbers don't lie, right?
It's true.
That's the good thing about metrics. And you're so right. Like it's all it takes is that one legitimate page or post that it resonates in the Google SEO world. and it's always popping up and you're always getting traffic. I've noticed that too, man. I have a couple of those pages on my site where I'm like, I haven't updated this in 2 years, but it's got 70,000 views. You know, it's like, what the heck?
Crazy. Yep. You earlier on, you mentioned that you found yourself spending 15, 20, 25 hours a week working on the site. And one of the things I always like to ask people that are in like our situation is, how do you find the balance, or what do you do to make sure you're putting balance between your primary day job, your family, and your side hustle?
Yeah. So I would say, first off, have open and honest conversations with my wife, right? How's my schedule looking? How's the balance between my time, being reflected to you? That's probably the most important thing. But yeah, it's one of those things where I'm a late night guy. So I know you're an early morning guy. I'm the flip side, right? I like to do things late at night. And so balancing out things when kids are asleep is how I kind of make this work. But I know when I'm hitting those points where I'm either just ridiculously tired of what I'm doing, or I can tell it's affecting my wife and kids. And there's the ebbs and flows of that, right? Where you just, like, that to me is more important than my day job or the side hustle, right? It's making sure my family is getting the right time from their dad and their husband. So,
yep, that makes sense. Do you have short-term or long-term goals for the site, or both? Do you establish goals? Are you a goal person?
I am. Yeah. Some of those, most of those are metric oriented, right? Because you can measure those very easily. But I do go in with the idea of, I want to try to get, X amount of posts up every year. I want to try to, do this to my traffic, and it's a little different for each, but I've been trying to break it down into monthly goals now, right? So I'm trying to get 8 unique posts out on the Patreon site and 4 up on the Breaker Culture site. And I'm trying to do 4 podcasts a month. That's kind of been my 2020 goal. So very, very simple metrics.
What about for the long term? So for example, for me, part of where I'm currently at is, over the next 10 to 15 years, I would love to be able to grow the site and the podcast to a point where it's generating some supplemental income that will allow for me to retire early, kind of at that early retirement point for my day job, and be able to make up the difference between kind of the full pension and the early retirement pension. And so I've got that level of a financial goal in my mind that's like a 10 to 15 year type goal. Do you go that far out when you're kind of thinking about what the site and the podcast could become?
I definitely don't go 10 or 15 years. I can tell you that, which is extremely impressive. No, I mean, of course, right. I look at this and I think, okay, the trajectory is nice. If we continue doing this, maybe 3 years, 4 years from now, maybe there's an opportunity to do more of this as a full-time gig. Right. And I've thought that from the beginning, right? And every year it seems like that gets pushed back because you have more kids and the cost of living goes up. And then also you just realize, like, it's difficult. This hobby is difficult to scratch out enough cash to do that. And it's evolving so quickly, right? We went into this year and everything's already kind of flipped upside down because of COVID and the new type of modern collector, right, as they've been saying. But yeah, I'd love to continue growing this. I mean, of course, I have those long-term aspirations of, again, making it bigger than it is. And I think a lot of that's going to be Bench Clear Media, right? How much can we tie this together to make it to where it's not just about me and the stuff I'm putting out, but about the group as a whole. So we'll see if that pans out.
Okay. One other thing that I'm curious about is there something that you would say that you've learned outside of the hobby that has had the biggest impact for your success in the hobby?
Yeah, so I would say that's a good question.
Making you think.
Yeah, no, I would say it probably goes back to, like, trust. Trust is the most important thing that I think that drives success. And if people can't trust you, or if you can't learn how to build trust with others, then it's all kind of for naught, if you ask me. And I feel like I've learned outside of the hobby, like the importance of being honest and no matter what, being transparent no matter what. And I've also learned in the hobby through, situations that like trust with people. that's so incredibly important. And there's a lot of great people in the hobby, and you and I both know that, but there's also a lot of people in the hobby that are very, very selfish and very very dishonest. And it's kind of sickening sometimes. So not being afraid to be honest, even if it's difficult.
Sure. Yeah. I think for me, the answer to that is that reputation matters, and building your reputation and is something that carries forward, that carries through, that people see. And when, like you said, when that reputation garners trust or respect, that is going to lead to good things in the long run. And when it doesn't, you're gonna see people flame out or burn out a little bit more. And so, for me, that it's similar in that reputation matters.
Mm.
All right, are you ready for? In the spirit of how you approach things, I want to flip the script a little bit and give you a few rapid fire questions as well.
Cool.
All right. First off, favorite junk wax era set?
Let's go with that's a good one. Gosh darn it, I should know that. I would say it's not even really junk wax, but it's the era. I'll go 96, 97 Flair basketball.
Okay. All right. Any particular reason?
It's because I still have the set in my books downstairs, and I've gone through it with the kids many times, looking through it.
Okay. How about your favorite breakfast meal?
Biscuits and gravy, no question.
Sausage?
100%, yeah.
Yep. Favorite 80s TV show? That might be a challenge because you're on that cusp of 90s was your prime, but do you have a favorite 80s TV show?
Yeah, so I'd go Alf.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely go Alf.
That is a good one.
Yeah.
All right. That was it. It was a brief rapid fire.
Hey, I like it. Very rapid
shots.
fire.
3 shots. All right, Ty, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it. But where can people follow you? Where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, so go to breakerculture.com. You'll find all the stuff there, or just go to benchclear.us and you'll see most of my content up there now too. So that's simple.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
You too.